Before we begin, if you love stories of redemption, unexpected love, and second chances, hit that like button and tell me in the comments, have you ever met someone who completely changed your life when you least expected it? Now let's dive into Ricardo and Valentina's incredible story. The Mendoza Tower pierced the Mexico City skyline like a monument to one man's ambition and his pain. At 42 floors, it cast a shadow over Paseo de la Reforma that seemed to darken everything it touched, much like its owner. Ricardo Mendoza stepped out of the emergency board meeting at 9:30, 3 hours earlier than expected. The quarterly projections could wait. The merger negotiations could wait. Everything could wait when the weight of March 15th pressed against his chest like a physical force. 3 years ago today, he had buried his daughter. His driver, Tomás, knew better than to speak during the ride to Polanco. The penthouse awaited, empty, silent, preserved exactly as Ricardo demanded it remain. Luciana's room untouched, her photographs still on the walls, her favorite stuffed rabbit still sitting on her pink bedspread, waiting for a little girl who would never return. The private elevator opened directly into his apartment. Ricardo loosened his tie, the Hermes silk suddenly feeling like a noose. He poured himself a whiskey, Macallan, 18 years, and stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city lights blur through eyes he refused to let water. 43 years old, 12 billion pesos in assets, the most feared businessman in Mexico. And absolutely, completely alone. He drained the glass and poured another. Then another. The alcohol did nothing to dull the memories. Luciana's laugh, her tiny hand in his, the way she called him papi with that slight lisp she never outgrew. Would never outgrow. Ricardo set down the empty glass and walked toward her room. He did this every year on this date. Opened the door, sat on her bed, let himself feel everything he spent the other 364 days avoiding. His hand touched the doorknob. Something was wrong. The door was slightly ajar. Ricardo never left it open. No one was permitted to enter this room. Not the housekeepers, not his mother, not anyone. His security system should have alerted him to any intrusion. He pushed the door open slowly, every muscle tensed, and froze. A child lay in Luciana's bed. A little girl, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, with dark hair spread across the pink pillow. She was curled around Luciana's rabbit, sleeping peacefully, her small chest rising and falling with each breath. For one impossible, insane moment, Ricardo's heart stopped. His mind rejected reality, grasped at impossible hope. But no, this wasn't Luciana. This child was thinner, her hair darker, her features different. A stranger's daughter in his dead daughter's bed. "What the hell?" he whispered. The child stirred but didn't wake. Ricardo noticed her clothes now, worn, faded, clearly second-hand. Her shoes, placed neatly beside the bed, had holes in the soles. A small backpack sat on the floor, its zipper broken, revealing what looked like a single change of clothes and a battered picture book. Rage and confusion battled inside him. How had this child gotten here? Who had dared to violate his sanctuary? He heard footsteps behind him, quick, panicked footsteps. "Sir! Mr. Mendoza, I can explain." Ricardo turned. A woman stood in the hallway, her face pale with terror. She wore the grey uniform of his cleaning service, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her eyes, striking green eyes, wide with fear. "Explain?" His voice came out cold, dangerous. "Explain how a stranger's child ended up in my daughter's room, in her bed, touching her things? Please, I'm so sorry, she wasn't supposed to. I told her to stay in the service area." "You brought a child into my home without permission?" The woman, Valentina, according to her name tag, took a step forward, then stopped, clearly afraid to approach him. "The daycare cancelled last minute. My regular babysitter is in the hospital. I couldn't miss another shift or I'd lose my job, and I can't lose this job, sir. Please." "So you decided to use my home as your personal childcare facility?" No, I mean, I left her in the utility room with her coloring books. I don't know how she found this room. She must have wandered off while I was cleaning the fourth floor. The door was locked. Valentina's face crumbled. She's good with locks, too good. I've been trying to break her of the habit, but she's curious about everything, and she doesn't understand boundaries yet. Clearly, neither do you. The words hit their mark. Valentina flinched, as if he'd slapped her. Something in her expression made Ricardo pause. Beyond the fear, beyond the desperation, he saw something else. Pride. Even now, even trembling before his anger, she held herself with a quiet dignity that seemed incongruous with her position. "I'll pack our things and go," she said, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "I apologize for the intrusion. It won't happen again." She moved toward the bed, reaching for her daughter. "Wait." The word surprised Ricardo as much as it seemed to surprise her. He didn't know why he'd said it, didn't know why something in his chest tightened at the thought of this woman and her daughter disappearing into the night. Valentina turned, cautious, hopeful. Ricardo looked at the sleeping child again. She had shifted in her sleep, one small hand now resting on the rabbit's worn ear, exactly the way Luciana used to hold it. How old is she? 5. She'll be 6 in August. Luciana would have been 9 this year. What's her name? Sophia. The child, Sophia, made a small sound in her sleep. A contented sigh that seemed impossibly loud in the silent room. Ricardo Mendoza had fired executives for lesser offenses than this, had destroyed careers over smaller breaches of his carefully constructed boundaries. This woman had violated the one space he held sacred, had allowed her daughter to sleep in his dead child's bed, touch his dead child's toys. He should be furious. He was furious. And yet, "She stays until she wakes naturally," he heard himself say. "Moving her now will frighten her." Valentina stared at him as if he'd grown a second head. "I thank you, Mr. Mendoza. Don't thank me yet." His voice hardened. "When she wakes, you'll both leave. And tomorrow morning you'll report to Human Resources to discuss the terms of your termination." The hope in her eyes died. She nodded once, accepting the verdict with that strange dignity intact. "I understand, sir. May I sit with her until she wakes?" Ricardo should have said no. Should have left the room, called security, had them both escorted out immediately. Every instinct he'd honed over 20 years of ruthless business dealings screamed at him to eliminate this threat to his carefully controlled existence. Instead, he stepped aside, allowing Valentina to pass. She moved to the chair beside the bed, Luciana's reading chair, where Ricardo used to sit and tell bedtime stories, and settled into it, with the ease of a woman accustomed to watching over her sleeping child. Ricardo remained in the doorway, unable to leave, unwilling to enter further. "The backpack," he said after a long moment. "Is that everything she has?" Valentina's hands tightened in her lap. "We're between situations right now." Between situations. A polite way of saying homeless, or close to it. "How long have you worked for the cleaning service?" 3 weeks, sir." "And before that?" Something flickered across her face. There and gone before he could identify it. "Various positions. I go where the work is." She was lying, or at least not telling the complete truth. Ricardo had built an empire on reading people, and this woman was hiding something significant behind those remarkable green eyes. "Your accent," he said. "Monterey." "Originally. I've moved around quite a bit." Another non-answer. Fascinating. Sophia stirred again, and Valentina immediately leaned forward, her hand hovering over her daughter's hair, ready to soothe any nightmare into submission. The gesture was so instinctively maternal that Ricardo felt something crack in his chest. Elena had never looked at Luciana that way. His ex-wife had viewed their daughter as an accessory, a photo opportunity, a bargaining chip in their divorce. When Luciana died, Elena had cried for the cameras and then flown to Monaco with her latest conquest. Ricardo had buried his daughter alone. "I'll have my assistant call you tomorrow," he said abruptly, "before your meeting with HR." Valentina looked up, confused. "Sir, just answer when she calls." He turned and walked away before she could respond, before he could examine too closely why he was offering even this small lifeline to a woman who had broken every rule he lived by. Behind him, he heard Valentina whisper something to her sleeping daughter, words too soft to catch, but the tone unmistakable. Love, pure and unconditional. Ricardo Mendoza closed the door to his study and poured another whiskey. 3 years of frozen grief, 3 years of empty rooms and silent dinners, and a heart he'd deliberately turned to stone. And tonight, a little girl with holes in her shoes had fallen asleep in his daughter's bed, clutching his daughter's rabbit, while her mother watched with eyes that held secrets. Tomorrow, he would fire Valentina, send her away, return to his carefully ordered existence. Tomorrow. But tonight, for reasons he couldn't explain, Ricardo found himself standing at his study window, unable to sleep, watching the city lights blur again. This time not from whiskey or grief, but from something far more dangerous, something that felt almost like hope. Valentina didn't sleep. She sat in that pink chair beside her daughter's borrowed bed, watching Sophia's peaceful face and calculating how many days they could survive on her remaining savings. 14 days, maybe 16 if she stretched it. The cleaning job had been her last option. After everything that happened in Monterrey, after running from city to city for 2 years, she'd finally landed in Mexico City with nothing but her daughter, her secrets, and a determination to survive. And now, because Sophia couldn't resist a closed door, even that was gone, she should be angry at her daughter, should be furious at the universe for conspiring against her at every turn. But watching Sophia sleep, really sleep, not the fitful half-rest they managed in shelters and cheap motels, Valentina could only feel a tired gratitude. At least for one night, her baby was warm and safe, Ricardo Mendoza's dead daughter. She'd heard the whispers among the cleaning staff, the tragedy that had transformed the brilliant young CEO into the Ice King who now terrorized 3 continents of business operations. A car accident, they said, 3 years ago. The wife had left. Mendoza had never recovered. Valentina understood loss. Understood how grief could hollow you out until there was nothing left but the shell of who you used to be. She'd felt it herself, watching everything she'd built crumble around her, while the man she trusted most smiled at her destruction. But she couldn't think about that now. Couldn't afford the luxury of dwelling on the past when the future was so uncertain. The first light of dawn crept through the curtains, pink curtains with little butterflies, clearly chosen by a child. Valentina studied the room she hadn't allowed herself to examine last night. The bookshelf filled with picture books and chapter books, a perfect progression of reading levels. The art supplies organized in rainbow order, the small desk with a half-finished drawing still taped to its surface, stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. The rabbit Sophia clutched had been well loved before this night. Its ears were worn, its button eyes slightly loose, its fur matted in places from years of bedtime cuddles. This room was a shrine, a frozen moment in time, preserved by a father who couldn't let go, and Sophia had invaded it completely. Valentina should wake her daughter now, while the penthouse was still quiet, should gather their meager belongings and slip away before facing Ricardo Mendoza's cold fury again. But something held her in place, some instinct she couldn't name. "Mummy?" Sophia's eyes fluttered open, dark brown eyes, nothing like her father's pale grey ones. "Gracias a Dios." She looked around the unfamiliar room with the easy acceptance of a child who'd slept in too many strange places. "Good morning, mi amor. This room is so pretty." Sophia sat up, still holding the rabbit. "Whose bunny is this?" Valentina's throat tightened. "It belonged to a little girl who lived here. Where is she now?" How did you explain death to a 5-year-old, especially one who'd already experienced too much loss and upheaval in her short life? "She went to heaven, Corazon, a long time ago." Sophia processed this with the solemn gravity only children could manage. Then she looked at the rabbit with new eyes. "She must miss her bunny. I think maybe she wanted you to take care of it for her." The words came out before Valentina could stop them. She immediately regretted them. The rabbit would stay here when they left. Another small loss for Sophia to process. "We should go now, baby. Get your shoes on." Sophia obeyed, though her gaze kept returning to the rabbit. Valentina helped her with the laces, both shoes now, since Valentina had patched them last week with cardboard inserts, and gathered their backpack. They slipped out of the room just as the penthouse elevator chimed. Valentina's heart stuttered. She pulled Sophia behind her, preparing for security guards, police, the formal ejection she'd been dreading. Instead, a woman stepped out. Early 30s, immaculately dressed, carrying a tablet and what appeared to be breakfast bags from somewhere expensive. "Valentina Reyes." "Yes, I'm Andrea Vega, Mr. Mendoza's executive assistant." The woman's voice was professionally warm, revealing nothing. "He asked me to meet with you this morning before your HR appointment." "I thought the HR appointment was the meeting." Andrea's lips quirked, the tiniest crack in her corporate facade. "Mr. Mendoza has reconsidered certain aspects of the situation. Please follow me. There's breakfast for the little one in the kitchen." Sophia perked up at the mention of food. They'd skipped dinner last night, and breakfast wasn't guaranteed in their current circumstances. Valentina hesitated. What exactly did he reconsider? "That's what we're here to discuss." Andrea was already walking toward the kitchen, clearly expecting them to follow. "I should mention, Mr. Mendoza reviewed your employment file this morning. He had some questions about your background verification documents." Valentina's blood ran cold. She'd been careful, so careful. New name, new history, new everything. The documents had cost her almost everything she had left, but they'd been worth it. They'd allowed her to disappear if Mendoza had found something. "Is there a problem with my documents?" Andrea paused, turning with that same unreadable expression. "Let's discuss it over breakfast. Sophia, do you like hot chocolate?" Sophia nodded eagerly, already won over. Children were easy that way. Offer them kindness and they opened like flowers. Adults were more complicated. The kitchen was larger than most apartments Valentina had lived in. Andrea settled Sophia at a breakfast bar with hot chocolate and conchas, then gestured for Valentina to follow her to a sitting area nearby, close enough to watch Sophia but far enough for private conversation. "Mr. Mendoza arrived at the office at 5 this morning," Andrea began. "He had me pull every piece of information available on you. Your employment application, your background check, your previous addresses, your emergency contacts." Valentina forced herself to breathe normally. And your background check came back clean. Remarkably clean, actually, for someone who's worked so many different positions in so many different cities. "I believe in fresh starts." Clearly. Andrea studied her with sharp, dark eyes. "The thing is, Ms. Reyes, I'm very good at my job. When something seems too clean, I dig deeper." This was it. The moment Valentina had been dreading for 2 years. The moment her carefully constructed new life collapsed. "I found some interesting gaps in your employment history," Andrea continued. "Periods where Valentina Reyes seems to have not existed. And when I cross-referenced certain dates with news archives from Monterey." "Please," Valentina's voice cracked. "Whatever you found, whatever you think you know, my daughter has nothing to do with any of it. She's innocent." Andrea's expression softened slightly. "I know. Then what do you want?" "I want to understand why a woman with an MBA from Tecnológico de Monterrey, who was once the youngest vice president in the history of Grupo Castellanos, is now cleaning floors in my boss's penthouse." The world tilted. Valentina gripped the arm of her chair, fighting the urge to grab Sophia and run. "That woman doesn't exist anymore." "Clearly she does. She's sitting right in front of me." Andrea leaned forward. "Valentina, or should I say Camila Castellanos, I'm not here to expose you. I'm here because Mr. Mendoza asked me to find out who you really are, and what I found intrigued him." Intrigued him. You have to understand something about Ricardo Mendoza. He spent 3 years shutting out the world, focusing only on his business, building walls so high that even I can barely see over them sometimes. Last night, A little girl with holes in her shoes fell asleep in his dead daughter's bed, and instead of calling the police, he let her stay. Valentina glanced at Sophia, who was happily dipping her concha into her hot chocolate, oblivious to the earthquake happening 10 feet away. "That doesn't mean anything. It means everything." Andrea's voice carried conviction. "I've worked for that man for 8 years. I've seen him fire people for looking at him wrong. Last night, you violated the most sacred space in his life, and his response was to stay up until dawn, researching your past. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" No, Valentina didn't understand. Couldn't understand why a billionaire would care about the secrets of a cleaning lady, why he'd have his assistant deliver breakfast instead of a termination notice, why any of this was happening. "What does he want from me?" Andrea smiled, a real smile this time. "That's the question, isn't it? He's asked to meet with you this afternoon. 2 o'clock at his office. Bring Sophia. He's arranged for childcare on the executive floor. And if I don't come, then you walk away with 2 months severance and a reference letter that will open any door in the city." Andrea stood. "But Valentina, Camila, whoever you choose to be, I've watched Ricardo Mendoza interview thousands of people. He's never personally requested a second meeting with anyone who's crossed him." She gathered her tablet and headed toward the elevator. At the door, she turned back. "For what it's worth, I also found records of what happened at Grupo Castellanos, the embezzlement charges, the accusations." She paused. "I found news articles about your trial, and I found the articles from 6 months later when the real embezzler was caught and your name was quietly cleared." Valentina's eyes burned. "That doesn't undo what happened, what I lost, what was taken from me." "No," Andrea agreed. "But it does explain why you're hiding, and it makes me wonder what Ricardo Mendoza sees in you that made him want to know more." The elevator doors closed behind her, leaving Valentina alone with her daughter, her secrets, and a decision that could change everything. Sophia appeared at her elbow, hot chocolate mustache adorning her upper lip. "Mummy, are you okay?" Valentina pulled her daughter close, breathing in the sweet smell of chocolate and childhood. "I'm okay, mi amor. That lady was nice. She gave me extra marshmallows." "She did?" "She said the man who owns this house asked her to." Sophia's brow furrowed with 5-year-old concentration. "Is he a good man, Mummy?" 2 years ago, Valentina would have known how to answer that question. She'd been a vice president at 28, engaged to the CEO's son, building a future that seemed golden and certain. She'd trusted her judgment, her instincts, her ability to read people. Then her fiancé had framed her for his own crimes, and she'd learned that she couldn't trust anything at all. "I don't know, baby," she answered honestly, "but I think maybe we're about to find out." Ricardo Mendoza had reviewed the files on Valentina Reyes, Camila Castellanos, 3 times. Each reading revealed new layers, new questions, new reasons why he should forget the whole thing and move on with his life. She was a fraud. A woman hiding under a false identity, working menial jobs to avoid detection, dragging her daughter through a nomadic existence that bordered on negligent. She was also innocent. Wrongfully accused, publicly destroyed, quietly exonerated after her reputation was already in ruins. The man who had framed her, her own fiancé, Hector Garza, had eventually been caught when his schemes grew too ambitious. But by then, Camila Castellanos had already disappeared. Ricardo understood the impulse to vanish. After Luciana's death, he'd wanted to disappear himself, to shed his name, his fortune, his identity, and become someone without the weight of grief crushing him daily. He'd stayed because running was cowardly, because Luciana deserved a father who faced his pain rather than fleeing from it, because his mother would have been devastated. But he understood. His office occupied the entire 42nd floor of Mendoza Tower. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city, and the furniture had been selected by a designer who understood that Ricardo wanted a space reflecting power without ostentation. Clean lines, dark woods, leather and steel. He was standing at those windows, watching the afternoon traffic crawl along Reforma, when Andrea announced Valentina's arrival. "Send her in." The woman who entered his office bore little resemblance to the terrified cleaning lady from last night. She'd changed clothes, still modest, but pressed and clean, and her hair was down, softening her features. Those green eyes met his directly without apology. "Interesting. Ms. Reyes, or do you prefer Castellanos?" She didn't flinch. "Reyes is fine. Castellanos no longer exists." "According to my research, she existed quite impressively. Youngest VP in your company's history, graduated top of your class at Tecnológico de Monterrey, fluent in 4 languages, considered one of the most promising young executives in Nuevo León. That was another life. And this life? Cleaning floors and hiding from a past that's already been resolved?" Now she flinched. Just slightly, but Ricardo caught it. The resolution came too late. Everything I built was already destroyed. My career, my reputation, my savings, all gone. By the time they admitted I was innocent, I had nothing left. "You had your qualifications, your intelligence. You could have rebuilt." Her laugh was bitter. "You think it's that simple? That a few newspaper retractions could undo 2 years of being branded a criminal? Do you know what it's like to apply for jobs when every Google search of your name brings up fraud allegations? When former colleagues cross the street to avoid you? When your own family believes the lies because the man telling them was so charming?" Ricardo thought of Elena, of how easily she'd turned friends against him after the divorce, how quickly his social circle had fractured when she told her version of events. "I have some understanding. Then you understand why I chose to disappear. Why I'd rather clean floors as Valentina Reyes than fight for scraps as Camila Castellanos. What I understand is that you're wasting an extraordinary mind on work that doesn't challenge you. What I understand is that your daughter is growing up in instability because her mother is too proud or too afraid to reclaim her life." The fire in her eyes was immediate and fierce. "Don't you dare bring my daughter into this. Everything I do, every choice I make is for her. Is it? Or is it for you? Because hiding isn't the same as protecting." Valentina stepped closer, and Ricardo caught a hint of her scent. Something clean and simple, nothing like the designer perfumes Elena had favored. "You don't know anything about what I've been through. You sit in your tower in your expensive suit, making judgments about choices you've never had to make. You think because you have money, you understand the world. You don't understand anything. Then enlighten me. Why?" She threw up her hands in frustration. "Why do you care? I'm nobody to you. A cleaning lady who let her daughter wander where she shouldn't. Just fire me and be done with it." "I should," Ricardo agreed. "Every rational instinct I have says to escort you out and never think about you again." "Then do it." "I can't." The admission surprised them both. Ricardo turned back to the window, gathering himself. 3 years ago, my daughter died. Luciana. She was 6 years old. Since then, I've structured my entire existence around control. Controlling my business, controlling my environment, controlling who enters my life and who doesn't. I'm sorry for your loss, but last night your daughter broke into a room I've kept locked for 3 years. A room no one enters. She found my daughter's rabbit, Luciana's favorite toy, and fell asleep holding it like it belonged to her. Valentina was silent. I should have been furious. I was furious, but when I saw her sleeping there, in Luciana's bed, holding Luciana's rabbit, something shifted, something I can't explain and don't particularly want to examine. He turned to face her. "I'm not offering you a job because I feel sorry for you. I'm offering because you have a mind that's wasted on manual labor, experience that could benefit my company, and because I find myself curious." "Curious about what?" "About who Camila Castellanos really is. About why a woman who could rebuild her life chooses to hide instead. About what happened in that room last night that made me feel something other than numb for the first time in 3 years." The silence stretched between them, charged with something neither wanted to acknowledge. "What kind of job?" Valentina finally asked. "My company is launching a new division, Sustainable Investment Initiatives. It requires someone who understands both the financial and human elements, someone who can speak to investors in their language while keeping sight of the actual impact on real people. You want me to run a division. I want you to consult on its development, part-time initially, while you determine if this is what you want. Full benefits including childcare on the executive floor, housing assistance until you're back on your feet. Her expression flickered between hope and suspicion. And what do you expect in return? Your expertise, your honesty. He paused. Your company at dinner once a week to discuss the project's progress. Dinner. Strictly professional, I assure you. I have no interest in what? Slumming with the help? The words had bite, but Ricardo heard the defensiveness behind them. She was waiting for the catch, the hidden agenda, the moment when everything collapsed. He'd felt the same way after Elena. Still felt it sometimes. I was going to say, I have no interest in complicating an already complex situation. You'd be working for my company. Any personal involvement would be inappropriate. Personal involvement. Her laugh was hollow. Yesterday I was cleaning your toilets. Today you're offering me a corporate position. Does this not seem insane to you? Entirely. And yet here we are. She stared at him with those green eyes that had seen too much betrayal to trust easily. Ricardo waited, offering nothing more. The choice had to be hers. I have conditions, she said finally. Name them. Sophia stays with me during work hours until she's comfortable with the daycare staff. I won't leave her with strangers. Reasonable. My identity stays protected. Whatever internal records you keep, list me as Valentina Reyes. No one outside your immediate circle knows about my past. Already planned. And if this doesn't work, if I can't do the job, or if the situation becomes untenable, I leave with a recommendation letter and severance. No questions, no pressure, no attempts to track where I go. Ricardo considered this. The control she was demanding went against every instinct he had. He liked knowing things, having leverage, ensuring no one could surprise him. But he understood why she needed it, why trust for her had to be built brick by brick. Agreed, but I have a condition as well. Wariness returned to her features, which is honesty. If something isn't working, you tell me directly. If you discover problems in the project or the company, you tell me. No disappearing without warning, no lies to spare my feelings. You want honesty from someone who's been living under a false name for 2 years. I want honesty about the present and future. The past is yours to share or not as you choose. Another long silence. Then Valentina nodded once, decisively. When do I start? Monday. Andrea will handle the paperwork tomorrow. She'll also arrange temporary housing. Nothing extravagant, but comfortable. Safe. Why are you doing this? The question hung between them, and Ricardo found he didn't have a clean answer. Because her daughter had slept in Luciana's bed, and somehow it hadn't destroyed him, because her eyes held the same hollow grief he saw in his own mirror, because something about her presence made his frozen world feel slightly less cold. Because I can, he said instead. And because you deserve a second chance that doesn't require you to hide who you really are. Valentina's composure cracked, just for a moment. He saw the exhaustion beneath it, the fear, the desperate hope she was trying so hard to suppress. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet. I'm a demanding employer. Ask anyone. The ghost of a smile crossed her lips. Somehow that doesn't surprise me. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Mr. Mendoza, Ricardo, if we're going to be working together, formality seems excessive. Ricardo, she tested the name. Your daughter's rabbit. Sophia hasn't stopped talking about it. She thinks the little girl in heaven wanted her to take care of it. His chest tightened. Children believe such things. Yes, they do. She met his eyes. But sometimes children see things more clearly than adults. Sometimes they know things we've forgotten how to understand. She left before he could respond. Ricardo stood alone in his office, watching the door she'd exited through, feeling the carefully constructed walls around his heart tremble with something that felt terrifyingly like possibility. His phone buzzed. A message from his mother. Dinner Sunday. No excuses this time. Normally he would have ignored it or sent Andrea to fabricate a conflict, but today, for reasons he couldn't quite articulate, he typed back a simple response. I'll be there. Maybe even the longest winters eventually gave way to spring. Maybe even the most frozen hearts could remember what warmth felt like. Or maybe he was losing his mind, chasing hope in the form of a woman with secrets and a daughter with holes in her shoes. Either way, for the first time in 3 years, Ricardo Mendoza found himself looking forward to Monday. And that, perhaps, was the most terrifying thing of all. 6 weeks had transformed everything, and nothing. Valentina had proven herself invaluable to the Sustainable Investment Initiative. Her insights during strategy meetings left senior executives speechless. Her ability to translate complex financial concepts into human terms had already attracted 3 major investors who'd previously dismissed the project as corporate virtue signaling. Ricardo found himself inventing reasons to visit her office, reviewing reports that didn't need reviewing, requesting updates on matters Andrea could easily handle. Each interaction left him wanting more of her sharp intelligence, more of her quiet strength, more of those rare moments when her guard dropped and she laughed at something he said. He was falling for her. The realization terrified him. Sophia had become a fixture on the executive floor. The daycare staff adored her, and she'd memorized the names of every security guard, receptionist, and janitor in the building. She called Ricardo Señor Ricardo, with a formality that made him smile, though lately she'd started slipping and calling him just Ricardo, the way her mother did. The rabbit, Luciana's rabbit, now lived in Sophia's tiny hands. Ricardo had given it to her officially 2 weeks ago, unable to bear the thought of separating them. Valentina had protested, understanding the weight of the gift, but Ricardo had insisted. Luciana would have wanted someone to love it, he'd said, and meant it. Everything was changing. Everything was possible. And then Elena returned. She arrived without warning on a Tuesday afternoon, sweeping into Ricardo's office in a cloud of Chanel and entitlement. 3 years had barely touched her. The same perfect blonde highlights, the same calculated smile, the same cold eyes that had once convinced him she was capable of love. "Darling," she purred, as if she hadn't abandoned him at his lowest moment. "You look well. Success suits you. What do you want, Elena? So cold, after everything we shared? What we shared ended when you left for Monaco before our daughter's grave had settled." Elena's smile didn't waver. "I was grieving. People grieve differently. You were photographed on a yacht with your lover 3 days after the funeral. Ancient history." She waved a manicured hand. "I'm here about the future. Specifically, about this." She dropped a folder on his desk. "My lawyers have been busy." Ricardo opened it, scanning the contents. His blood ran cold. "You're claiming half of Mendoza Industries. I'm claiming what's rightfully mine. We were married for 7 years, Ricardo. Mexican law is quite clear about marital assets. We've been divorced for 3 years. You signed away your claims in the settlement. I signed under duress, emotional trauma from losing our daughter. My lawyers believe any court would sympathize with a grieving mother who was pressured into an unfair agreement by her wealthy husband." The audacity was breathtaking. Elena had never been a mother to Luciana, not in any way that mattered. She'd hired nannies, scheduled photo opportunities, paraded their daughter at social events like an accessory. When Luciana got sick, Elena had been in Paris. When Luciana died, Elena had been more concerned about the funeral's guest list than her daughter's memory. This will never hold up in court. Perhaps not, but the publicity alone will be devastating. Imagine the headlines. Grieving mother denied her rights by billionaire ex-husband. Your precious sustainable initiative depends on your reputation, doesn't it? How will those socially conscious investors feel about backing a man who exploits bereaved women? Ricardo understood then. This wasn't about money. Elena had money. Her family's fortune had survived their divorce intact. This was about control, about proving she could still hurt him. "What do you really want?" Elena's smile sharpened. I want back in. The social connections, the board appearances, the legitimacy that comes with the Mendoza name. I want to be relevant again. Never. Think carefully, Ricardo. I've heard interesting things about your new consultant. The one with the daughter. The one who isn't who she claims to be. Every muscle in Ricardo's body tensed. You know nothing about her. I know she's been living under a false identity. I know she has a criminal record. Well, had one technically, but the accusations are still out there for anyone who searches deeply enough. I know she's been hiding from something or someone. Eleanor leaned forward. Imagine what that story would look like in the press. Billionaire CEO hires disgraced executive as consultant, moves her into company housing, gives his dead daughter's toys to her child. The optics are complicated. Get out. I'll give you a week to consider my proposal. Reinstate me publicly as your partner. Business partner, nothing more. I'm not interested in rekindling romance. And I'll keep quiet about your little project and your interesting new friend. She gathered her purse and headed for the door. 1 week, Ricardo. Choose wisely. The door closed behind her. Ricardo sat motionless, his mind racing through scenarios, countermeasures, damage control options. He should tell Valentina, should warn her about the threat, give her time to prepare or disappear again if that's what she chose. But telling her meant admitting how deeply Elena's threat had struck him, meant acknowledging that his feelings for Valentina had grown beyond professional interest, beyond mere curiosity, into something that terrified him, meant risking that she would leave anyway to protect herself and Sophia, and he would lose them both. His phone buzzed. A message from Valentina. Sophia made you something. Can we stop by before leaving? Ricardo stared at the screen for a long moment. Then he typed, of course. He would handle Elena. He would protect Valentina and Sophia. He would find a way through this that didn't require sacrificing everything he'd begun to hope for. He just needed time. But time, as it turned out, was the one thing he didn't have. 3 days later, the story broke. Not from Elena, from someone worse. Hector Garza had found them. Valentina's ex-fiancé, the man who had framed her, destroyed her life and driven her into hiding, had somehow discovered her location, and he had decided that if he couldn't have her, no one would. The article appeared in a business tabloid first, then spread like wildfire across social media. Mendoza, CEO's secret lover, disgraced executive, hiding under false name. The story painted Valentina as a con artist who had seduced her way into Ricardo's company, using her daughter to manipulate a grieving father. It named Sophia. Published her photograph. Ricardo learned about it when Andrea burst into his office, pale-faced and trembling. Sir, you need to see this, and you need to know. Valentina is gone. Gone? She took Sophia and left an hour ago. No forwarding address. She wouldn't tell anyone where she was going. The world tilted. Ricardo grabbed his desk for support. Find her. Sir, she doesn't want to be found. She left this. Andrea handed him an envelope. Inside, a single page in Valentina's handwriting. Ricardo, I'm sorry. I should have known my past would catch up eventually. I should have been stronger, smarter, more careful. Instead, I let myself hope, and now that hope has put you and your company at risk. Sophia asks about you constantly. She asks about the rabbit, which she insisted on leaving behind because it belongs to Luciana's daddy. She doesn't understand why we had to leave. I don't have the heart to explain that her mother's mistakes are still destroying everything they touch. Please, don't look for us. The best thing I can do for you now is disappear. The story will die down if I'm not there to fuel it. Your reputation will recover. Your company will survive. I wish things could have been different. Thank you for seeing me when everyone else only saw a cleaning lady. Thank you for giving Sophia 6 weeks of stability and kindness. Thank you for making me believe, even briefly, that second chances were possible. Take care of yourself, Ricardo. You deserve happiness, even if you don't believe it yet. Valentina. Ricardo read the letter 3 times. Each reading carved deeper into his chest. She was gone. She had protected him by removing herself, by sacrificing her own chance at rebuilding so that his world could remain intact. She had done exactly what he would have done, put others first, retreated into isolation, chosen control over vulnerability. And it was absolutely, completely unacceptable. Andrea, sir, cancel everything for the rest of the week. Get me every piece of information you can find on Hector Garza, his current location, his business dealings, his vulnerabilities, and find out how Elena knew about Valentina's past before this story broke. You think they're connected? Ricardo thought about timing, about Elena's threat 3 days before the story appeared, about how Hector Garza could have possibly located a woman who had successfully hidden for 2 years. I think my ex-wife decided that destroying my happiness was worth more than whatever deal I might have offered her. And I think Hector Garza found a willing ally in his vendetta. What are you going to do? Ricardo looked at the letter in his hands, at the rabbit sitting on his desk where Sophia had left it, waiting for a little girl who had already lost too much. I'm going to burn them both, and then I'm going to find Valentina and bring her home. Home. The word surprised him, but it felt right. Somewhere in the past 6 weeks, the penthouse had stopped being a mausoleum. Somewhere between strategy meetings and dinner conversations and Sophia's laughter echoing through halls that had been silent for 3 years, Ricardo had begun to heal. Valentina had given him that, had given him hope without asking for anything in return. Now it was his turn to fight for her, to prove that the love growing between them was worth more than reputation, more than business, more than the fear that had kept them both trapped in their separate prisons. He picked up the rabbit and held it close. "Hold on, Sophia," he whispered. "I'm coming." Valentina had made it as far as Querétaro before her car broke down. It seemed fitting somehow, the universe confirming what she'd always suspected, that running was pointless, that her past would always catch up, that hope was just another form of cruelty. She found a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city and paid cash for 3 nights. Sophia, exhausted from crying, fell asleep, clutching the picture book Ricardo had given her. A beautiful illustrated story about a rabbit who finds a new family. Valentina sat in the darkness and let herself fall apart. She had been so close. 6 weeks of stability, of meaningful work, of watching her daughter thrive in an environment that offered safety and consistency. 6 weeks of conversations with a man who saw past her disguise, who challenged her intellectually, who looked at her like she was something precious rather than something broken. 6 weeks of falling in love with Ricardo Mendoza while pretending she wasn't. And now it was over. Again. Because Hector Garza couldn't accept that she had escaped him, couldn't stand the thought of her rebuilding while he faced the consequences of his crimes. The article had been devastating. Not just because it exposed her identity, but because of how it framed the narrative. Valentina as predator, Ricardo as victim, Sophia as prop in an elaborate con. Every tender moment twisted into something ugly. She thought about calling Ricardo, explaining, apologizing, begging for understanding. But what good would that do? The damage was done. His company was suffering. His reputation was tarnished. The sustainable initiative, the project she'd poured her heart into, was probably being dismantled as she sat here in the dark. Better to disappear completely, better to let him hate her than to watch him sacrifice everything trying to defend her. Her phone buzzed, unknown number. She ignored it. It buzzed again and again. Finally, she answered. "Who is this?" "Valentina." "Thank God." Andrea's voice tight with urgency. "Don't hang up, please. How did you get this number?" "Ricardo has every resource in Mexico looking for you. I'm just the fastest." A pause. "He's on his way to Monterrey. He thinks you went back there." "Why would I go to Monterrey? That's the last place." "Because that's where Hector Garza is." Ricardo found out that Garza and Elena coordinated the article together. Elena provided information about your location and your new identity. Garza wrote the story and made sure it spread. Valentina's blood ran cold. Elena, Ricardo's ex-wife. She showed up last week demanding he reinstate her publicly or she'd expose you. He refused. 3 days later, the article appeared. He knew. He knew she was threatening him because of me, and he didn't. He was trying to protect you. He thought he could handle Elena without involving you, without frightening you or Sophia. Valentina closed her eyes. Ricardo, trying to fight her battles without telling her. Ricardo, losing everything because he'd chosen to protect her instead of himself. I left to protect him. I thought if I disappeared, the story would die. The story is dying, but not for the reasons you think. Andrea's voice softened. Ricardo held a press conference this morning. He told the truth, all of it. Your real identity, the false accusations, your exoneration, everything. He explained how he hired you, knowing exactly who you were, because your qualifications were exceptional and you deserved a chance to rebuild. He did what? He also announced that he's filing suit against Hector Garza for defamation and harassment, and he's given everything he knows about Elena's involvement to the press. By tomorrow, she'll be the villain, not you. Valentina's hands were shaking. Why? Why would he destroy his own image to defend me? Because he loves you, Valentina. Anyone with eyes can see it. The question is whether you love him enough to stop running. The words hit like a physical blow. Love. Such a simple word for something so terrifying. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. I don't know how to trust someone again. Every time I've tried, every time you've tried, you chose the wrong person. Men who wanted what you could give them, not who you actually were. Andrea paused. Ricardo is different. He has everything. Money, power, success. The only thing he wants from you is you, and Sophia, and a chance to be the man Luciana would have been proud of. Valentina looked at her sleeping daughter, at the picture book about a rabbit finding a new family, at all the things she'd been running from and all the things she'd been running toward without knowing it. Where is he now? Flying to Monterrey. He'll land in about 2 hours. Tell him to turn around. Valentina, tell him to go home. Tell him I'll meet him there. She ended the call before Andrea could respond. Then she woke Sophia gently, packed their meager belongings, and walked to the bus station. It was time to stop running. The bus ride to Mexico City took 5 hours. 5 hours of watching the landscape change from desert to mountains to sprawl. 5 hours of Sophia asking questions Valentina couldn't answer, and then falling asleep against her shoulder. 5 hours of preparing herself for the hardest conversation of her life. Ricardo was waiting at the bus station. Later, she would learn that Andrea had tracked her ticket purchase, had redirected Ricardo's plane mid-flight, had coordinated everything with military precision. In the moment, all she saw was him, standing alone among the crowd, looking more disheveled than she'd ever seen him, his eyes scanning desperately until they found her. Everything stopped. The crowd faded, the noise dimmed. There was only Ricardo, walking toward her with an expression that made her heart crack open. "You came back," he said, his voice rough. "You told the truth. I should have told it sooner. I should have trusted you with Elena's threat instead of trying to handle it alone. I ran. Again. I put protecting myself ahead of fighting for what matters." They stood there, inches apart, all the words they needed to say tangled between them. Sophia stirred in Valentina's arms, lifting her head sleepily. When she saw Ricardo, her face transformed. "Ricardo!" He reached for her instinctively, and Valentina let her go. Sophia wrapped her arms around his neck with the absolute trust only children possess. "You found us," she said into his shoulder. "I'll always find you, pequeña. Always." Valentina watched them, her daughter, in the arms of a man she barely knew 6 weeks ago, and felt the last of her resistance crumble. "I have something for you," Ricardo said to Sophia. He reached into his jacket and produced the rabbit. Sophia's eyes went wide. "But I left her for you, so you wouldn't be lonely." "I was lonely." He looked at Valentina as he spoke. "Even with Señora Coneja, I was lonely. The only thing that makes the loneliness better is you two." Sophia hugged the rabbit tight. "Can we go home now?" "Home." From her daughter's lips, the word was both question and declaration. Ricardo turned to Valentina, everything he felt visible in his dark eyes. "Can you?" he asked quietly. "Can you stop running long enough to let this be home?" She thought about fear, about trust, about all the ways love had failed her before. Then she thought about Ricardo's press conference, his willingness to sacrifice his reputation for her truth, about Sophia's laughter echoing through penthouse halls, about the way he looked at her, not as a project to fix or a possession to acquire, but as an equal, a partner, a person worth fighting for. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "So am I. I don't know if I can do this, if I can be what you need. I don't need you to be anything except yourself, Valentina, Camilla. Whatever name you choose, I just need you." She took a breath, let it out, made a choice. "Then take us home." His smile was like sunrise after 3 years of darkness. The wedding was held in San Miguel de Allende on a perfect October afternoon. Valentina had insisted on something small, just family and close friends in the garden of a restored hacienda. Ricardo had agreed, then quietly arranged for the most exquisite flowers, the finest catering, and a string quartet that had performed for royalty. "This is your definition of small?" Valentina asked when she saw the setup. "I compromised. No ice sculptures." She laughed, and Ricardo felt it in his chest, that warm expansion that happened every time she let herself be happy. 8 months had passed since the bus station. 8 months of rebuilding, healing, learning to trust. Valentina had officially resumed her identity as Camilla Castellanos, though those who loved her still called her Valentina. The Sustainable Investment Initiative had launched to unprecedented success, largely due to her leadership. 3 major publications had profiled her comeback story, focusing not on her fall, but on her resilience. Hector Garza was in prison. His harassment of Valentina had been only one of many crimes that surfaced once investigators started digging. Fraud, embezzlement, witness intimidation. He would spend the next 15 years contemplating his choices. Elena had retreated to Europe after the scandal destroyed what remained of her social standing. The lawsuit Ricardo filed had stripped her of any claim to Mendoza Industries, and the court of public opinion had stripped her of everything else. Last anyone heard, she was living in a small apartment in Madrid, far from the luxury she'd once taken for granted. Doña Carmen, Ricardo's mother, had wept with joy when she met Valentina and had immediately adopted Sofia as her honorary granddaughter. Now she sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief, looking more content than Ricardo had seen her in years. Andrea stood beside Valentina as maid of honor, the professional distance of their early relationship having transformed into genuine friendship. She had been instrumental in rebuilding Valentina's public image, but more importantly, she had become the sister neither woman had ever had. Sofia walked down the aisle first, scattering rose petals with intense concentration, Señora Coneja tucked firmly under one arm. She had been practicing for weeks, determined to perform her flower girl duties perfectly. Then Valentina appeared. She wore simple ivory, a flowing dress that moved with her, no elaborate train or heavy embellishments. Her hair was loose, the way Ricardo preferred it, with small white flowers woven through the dark strands. She carried a bouquet of gardenias, their fragrance drifting through the warm afternoon air. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "Breathe," Miguel, his best man and oldest friend, whispered. Ricardo couldn't. He could only watch her walk toward him, each step bringing her closer to a future neither of them had dared to imagine. When she reached him, Valentina smiled, that rare, unguarded smile that was becoming less rare every day. "You look terrified," she whispered. "I've never wanted anything this much." "Is that what's scary? Having something to lose is always scary. But I've learned that the fear of losing is nothing compared to the emptiness of never having at all." The priest began the ceremony. Traditional vows, spoken in the garden where generations of lovers had pledged themselves before. But when the moment came for personal words, Ricardo took both of Valentina's hands in his. 3 years ago, I stopped believing in second chances. I thought my story was over, that everything good had already happened, and the rest would just be survival. He paused, steadying himself. Then a little girl fell asleep in a room I'd kept locked, and her mother looked at me without fear and called me on every wall I'd built. You didn't save me, Valentina. You made me want to save myself. You made me believe that love wasn't just something I'd lost, but something I could find again. Different, yes, but just as real. Valentina's eyes glistened. I spent 2 years hiding from my past, telling myself that if I could just disappear completely, I could start over. But starting over isn't the same as moving forward. You showed me that. She squeezed his hands. You saw who I really was, not the disgraced executive or the cleaning lady or the woman in hiding, but all of it together. You saw me, and you chose me anyway, not despite my past, but including it. I love you, Ricardo said. I love your strength and your stubbornness and the way you challenge me when I'm being unreasonable. I love watching you with Sophia, knowing that's the kind of parent I want to be. I love that you make me want to be better. Not for my company or my legacy, but for you, for us, for the family we're building. I love you too. Valentina's voice broke slightly. I love that you gave my daughter a rabbit and let her into your heart. I love that you fight for what matters and admit when you're wrong. I love that you make me feel safe enough to stop running. The priest pronounced them married. Ricardo kissed his wife as the small gathering erupted in applause. Sophia raced forward, abandoning flower girl dignity. Are we a real family now? Ricardo scooped her up with one arm, the other still around Valentina. We've been a real family for a while, pequeña. This just makes it official. Does this mean I can call you Papa? The question hit Ricardo like a wave. He looked at Valentina, who nodded with tears streaming down her face. I would be honored, he managed. Sophia threw her arms around his neck. Papa, she said, testing the word. Papa, Mama, and me, and Señora Coneja. And Señora Coneja, Ricardo agreed solemnly. The reception unfolded in a haze of champagne, dancing, and more happiness than Ricardo had thought possible. Doña Carmen made a toast that had everyone crying. Andrea gave a speech that perfectly balanced humor and heart. Miguel told embarrassing stories from Ricardo's youth that made Valentina laugh until she couldn't breathe. As the sun set and the garden filled with candlelight, Ricardo found Valentina standing alone at the edge of the celebration, watching their guests with a soft smile. Having second thoughts, Mrs. Mendoza? She turned to him, and her expression held none of the wariness that had once defined their interactions. Only peace. Only love, just thinking about how strange life is. A year ago, I was cleaning floors and wondering how I'd feed my daughter next week. Now I'm married to a man I love, building something meaningful, watching Sophia thrive. Any regrets? Only that we didn't find each other sooner. She leaned into him, but maybe we weren't ready sooner. Maybe we both needed to break before we could learn how to heal together. Ricardo wrapped his arms around her, breathing in the gardenia scent of her bouquet. I used to think Luciana's death was the end of my story. Now I think it was just the beginning of a different chapter. She would have loved Sophia. She would have loved you. He kissed her hair. I like to think she arranged all of this somehow. Sent Sophia wandering into her room so her impossible father would finally wake up. Valentina laughed softly. You believe that? I believe that love finds a way. I believe that the people we lose stay with us, guiding us toward what we need, even when we can't see it ourselves. Sophia appeared, tugging at both their hands. The cake! They're cutting the cake. They let her lead them back to the celebration, back to the joy waiting at the center of their new life. Later that night, after the guests had gone and Sophia had fallen asleep in a cloud of tulle and sugar, Ricardo and Valentina stood on the balcony of the hacienda, looking out at the lights of San Miguel twinkling below. So what happens now? Valentina asked. Now we go home. We build our life. We expand the foundation and watch Sophia grow and argue about whose turn it is to cook dinner. That sounds remarkably normal. Is that a problem? She turned to face him fully, this woman who had transformed his world simply by existing in it. No, normal sounds perfect. I've had enough drama for several lifetimes. Ricardo pulled her close, feeling the rightness of her in his arms, the certainty that this was exactly where he was meant to be. Then let's be normal together. Extraordinarily, beautifully, perfectly normal. Valentina kissed him softly. Deal. Above them, the stars scattered across the October sky like promises waiting to be kept. Below them, a city slept peacefully, unaware of the small miracle unfolding on this balcony. And somewhere, in that mysterious space between loss and love, a little girl with a worn rabbit smiled, knowing that her father had finally found his way home. The end.